Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another journey through history. I hope you're all settling in comfortably, whether you're winding down for the night, taking a peaceful break, or just looking for something calming to listen to. Today, we're going to dive deep into ancient Egypt, but not the glamorous side you see in movies. We're talking about what it was really like to work a single day as an ordinary person in ancient Egypt, and why most of us modern folks would probably be dead within hours. We'll explore the brutal reality of daily labor, the unforgiving desert conditions, and the incredible human endurance that built one of history's greatest civilizations. Comment what time you're watching this and where from. If you'd like, it's fun to know. Now let's step back in time about 4,000 years and see if you could survive just one day in the life of an ancient Egyptian worker. Picture this. The sun hasn't even appeared over the horizon yet, but you're already awake. Not because you have an alarm clock, but because your body has learned that sleeping past dawn in ancient Egypt means you'll be working in the deadly heat of midday. The temperature right now, before sunrise, is probably around 70 degrees Fahrenheit. In about 6 hours, it'll be over 110 degrees, and there's no air conditioning, no cold drinks, and definitely no taking the day off because it's too hot. You're lying on a reed mat in a small mud brick house. The walls are thick, which helps keep some of the heat out, but they also trap the stale air inside. There's no glass in the windows, just openings that let in dust, insects, and whatever breeze might be stirring. Your pillow is a wooden headrest that would give most modern people a terrible neck ache, but you've used it your whole life. The first thing you notice as consciousness returns is thirst. Your mouth feels like it's full of sand, which isn't entirely wrong since fine desert dust gets into everything. Water is your first priority, but it's not as simple as turning on a tap. You have a large pottery jar in the corner of your room, filled yesterday with water from the Nile. The water tastes muddy and has a light metallic flavor, but it's been filtered through cloth and allowed to settle overnight. You drink deeply, knowing that the water you consume now might be the difference between making it through the workday and collapsing from heat stroke. As you prepare for the day, you realize that everything about getting ready is different from modern life. There's no shower, just a basin of water for washing your face and hands. Soap exists, but it's a luxury made from animal fat and ash that most ordinary workers can't afford. You use a mixture of natron, a naturally occurring salt, mixed with oil to clean yourself. It works, but it's harsh on the skin and leaves you feeling dry and tight. Your clothes are simple. A linen kilt if you're a man, a straight linen dress if you're a woman. Linen is perfect for the hot climate because it breathes well and wicks moisture away from your skin, but the fabric you can afford is coarse and rough. The wealthy wear fine, soft linen that feels like silk, but your garment is more like wearing a burlap sack. It's clean though, because dirty clothes in the desert heat mean rashes, infections, and worse. Breakfast is crucial, but it's nothing like what modern people consider a morning meal. You have a piece of flat bread made from emmer wheat, a grain that's harder and more nutritious than modern wheat, but also more difficult to digest. The bread is dense and chewy, and you soften it with a cup of weak beer. Yes, beer for breakfast, but it's not like modern beer. Ancient Egyptian beer was thick, nutritious, and had a low alcohol content. It was safer to drink than water in many cases, and provided calories and nutrients that you'd need for the brutal day ahead. If you're lucky, you might have an onion or some dried fish to go with your bread. Onions were incredibly valuable in ancient Egypt, not just for flavor, but because they helped prevent scurvy and other diseases caused by poor nutrition. The workers who built the pyramids were actually paid in onions, garlic, and radishes because these foods were so important for maintaining health during hard physical labor. By the time you finish eating, you can hear the sounds of the neighborhood waking up. Dogs barking, children crying, adults calling to each other across the narrow streets. The air is starting to warm up, and you know that every minute you delay means working in hotter conditions later. You step outside, and the first thing that hits you is the smell. Ancient Egyptian cities were crowded, and sanitation was primitive. The streets are narrow dirt paths between mud brick houses, and there's a constant odor of cooking fires, animals, human waste, and the dusty smell of the desert. Raw sewage flows through open channels, and flies are everywhere. Disease spreads quickly in these conditions, and many people don't live past 30 years old. The walk to your workplace begins before the sun is fully up. If you're a farmer, you're heading to the fields along the Nile. If you're a construction worker, you might be walking to a pyramid site, a temple construction project, or the building of a new canal. If you're a craftsman, you're going to a workshop where you'll spend the day making everything from pottery to jewelry to furniture. Let's say you're a construction worker heading to a pyramid building site. The walk itself is a challenge that would defeat many modern people. You're walking several miles across desert terrain, carrying your own tools and water. The sand gets into your sandals, which are made of woven reeds or papyrus. Your feet are tough from a lifetime of walking on rough surfaces, but even so, the hot sand and sharp stones take their toll. As you walk, you pass other workers heading to their jobs. There are farmers with their hoes and baskets, craftsmen carrying their specialized tools, merchants leading donkeys loaded with goods, and government officials being carried in litters by teams of servants. The social hierarchy is visible everywhere you look. The wealthy are carried or ride in carts, while ordinary workers like you walk. The sun is rising now, and you can feel the temperature climbing. By the time you reach the construction site, it's already uncomfortably warm, and the day hasn't really started yet. The pyramid you're helping to build is a massive undertaking that will take decades to complete. Thousands of workers are involved, from skilled stonemasons to laborers who move the enormous blocks of limestone. Your job today is moving stones, not the massive blocks that form the pyramid itself. Those require teams of dozens of men and sophisticated ramps and pulleys. Your job is moving the smaller stones, the ones that weigh only a few hundred pounds each. You and 3 other men will spend the day loading these stones onto wooden sledges, dragging them to where they're needed, and unloading them. The first stone of the day nearly breaks you. 400 pounds of limestone has to be lifted from the ground onto a sledge that's about waist high. You and your 3 partners squat down, get your hands under the stone, and lift together. The weight is enormous, but that's not the worst part. The worst part is that the stone is already hot from sitting in the sun, and limestone holds heat like a radiator. By the time you get it loaded, your hands are burned and your back is screaming, but you're just getting started. The sledge has to be dragged about 200 yards to where the stone masons are working. The sledge runs on wooden rollers, which help, but it still takes all four of you pulling on ropes to move it. The rollers have to be constantly repositioned as the sledge moves forward, so progress is slow and exhausting. By now, the sun is getting serious about heating up the desert. It's probably 90 degrees, and you're already soaked in sweat. But sweating in the desert isn't like sweating in a humid climate. The dry air sucks the moisture out of your body so fast that you can actually watch your sweat evaporate. This might seem like a good thing, but it's actually dangerous because you don't realize how much fluid you're losing. Water breaks are scheduled, but they're brief and the water is warm and tastes terrible. You drink as much as you can hold, but it's never enough. Dehydration is a constant threat, and you can see its effects in your fellow workers. Some of them are already showing signs of heat exhaustion, moving slowly, breathing hard, looking pale despite the sun exposure. The work continues, stone after stone, sledge after sledge. Your hands are raw and bleeding from the rough ropes and hot limestone. Your back aches from the constant lifting and pulling. Your feet are burning inside your sandals, and sand has worked its way into every crevice of your clothing, creating a constant irritation against your skin. Around what modern people would call 10 in the morning, the heat becomes truly dangerous. It's over 100 degrees now, and the sun is beating down mercilessly. There's no shade at the construction site, just the blazing sun and the white-hot limestone reflecting even more heat. The air shimmers with heat waves, and every breath feels like inhaling fire. This is when modern people would start dropping like flies. Your body is designed to maintain a core temperature of about 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. When the air temperature is over 100 degrees and you're doing hard physical labor, your body has to work incredibly hard to stay cool. You're sweating profusely, but the sweat evaporates so quickly that it's not cooling you effectively. Your heart is pounding, not just from the physical exertion, but because it's trying to pump blood to your skin to help with cooling. Your breathing becomes rapid and shallow. You might start feeling dizzy or nauseous. These are the early signs of heat stroke, and in ancient Egypt, heat stroke meant death. But you can't stop working. There are overseers watching, men with whips who make sure the work continues. These aren't necessarily cruel men, they're just doing their jobs. But their job is to make sure the pyramid gets built on schedule. If you collapse, you'll be dragged to whatever shade can be found, and someone else will take your place. If you recover, you can go back to work. If you don't, well, there are always more workers. The limestone blocks seem to be getting heavier, but that's probably just fatigue setting in. Your muscles are running out of energy, and your body is prioritizing cooling over strength. Every stone is a monumental effort now. You and your partners are barely talking, just focusing on breathing and moving and trying not to collapse. Around noon, the heat reaches its peak. It's probably 115 degrees now, hot enough to cook an egg on the limestone blocks. The metal tools are too hot to touch with bare hands. The sand is so hot it would burn your feet if you weren't wearing sandals, and even with sandals, You can feel the heat coming through. This is when you realize that ancient Egyptians were incredibly tough people. What you're experiencing right now would hospitalize most modern humans, but for these workers, it was just Tuesday. They had adapted to these conditions over generations. Their bodies were leaner and more efficient at cooling. Their cardiovascular systems were stronger from a lifetime of physical labor. Their skin was darkened and toughened by constant sun exposure. But even the toughest ancient Egyptian had limits. You can see men staggering, falling, being carried away by their fellow workers. The weak don't survive long in these conditions, which is part of why the average lifespan was so short. It wasn't just disease and poor nutrition that killed people, it was the simple brutality of daily life. The work continues through the worst heat of the day. There's no lunch break, just occasional sips of warm water, and maybe a piece of bread if you're lucky. Your body is running on empty now, powered more by determination and fear than by actual energy. Your vision is starting to blur slightly, and you're having trouble focusing on complex tasks. Moving each stone has become a battle. Your hands can barely grip the ropes anymore. Your legs are shaking with fatigue. Your back feels like it might snap at any moment. But you keep going because stopping means punishment, and punishment in ancient Egypt could range from reduced food rations to physical beatings to being sold into slavery. Around 2 in the afternoon, something happens that saves your life, though you don't realize it at the time. A cloud passes over the sun. It's not a big cloud, and it only provides shade for about 10 minutes. But those 10 minutes allow your body temperature to drop just enough to keep you from heat stroke. You and your fellow workers instinctively stop moving and just stand in the blessed shade, breathing hard, trying to recover. When the cloud passes and the full sun returns, the heat feels even more oppressive than before. But somehow, that brief respite has given you the strength to continue. You pick up your rope, your partners pick up theirs, and you drag another sledge load of stones across the burning desert. The afternoon stretches on endlessly. Time moves differently when you're suffering. Minutes feel like hours, and hours feel like days. You lose track of how many stones you've moved, how many trips you've made, how much water you've drunk. Your world has narrowed down to just the next stone, the next step, the next breath. Your fellow workers are struggling too. One of your partners, a man named Kenti, who has worked construction for 15 years, finally collapses around 3 in the afternoon. He just stops pulling his rope and sits down heavily in the sand. His face is gray, his breathing is rapid and shallow, and his eyes have a glassy look that everyone recognizes as the beginning of heat stroke. You and the other 2 workers drag him to a small patch of shade beside a pile of cut stones. There's nothing you can really do for him except give him water and hope he recovers. There's no medical care, no paramedics, no hospital to rush him to. He either recovers on his own or he dies, and everyone has seen both outcomes plenty of times. A replacement worker is sent over to take Canty's place. This happens so routinely that there's always a pool of reserve workers waiting for exactly this situation. The new man is younger and stronger, but he's also less experienced, which means the work becomes more difficult and dangerous for everyone. As the afternoon progresses, you start to understand something important about ancient Egyptian society. The pyramids, the temples, the massive construction projects that we admire today, they were built with human suffering on a scale that's almost impossible to comprehend. Every block of stone represents someone's blood, sweat, and often life. The monuments that have lasted thousands of years were paid for with the shortened lives of countless workers. But there's also something admirable about these people. They endured conditions that would kill most modern humans, and they did it day after day, year after year. They built things that have lasted longer than entire civilizations. There's a kind of heroism in their endurance, even if it was forced upon them by circumstances and social systems they had no control over. Around 4 in the afternoon, you notice that your urine has turned dark yellow, almost orange. This is a sign of severe dehydration, and in modern times, it would be a reason to stop working immediately and seek medical attention. But there is no medical attention, and the workday isn't over yet. You drink more water, but it's warm and tastes increasingly foul as the day progresses. The heat begins to ease slightly as the sun starts its descent toward the western horizon. It's still over 100 degrees, but after 6 hours of working in temperatures above 110, even 105 feels cool by comparison. You can think a little more clearly, and your movements become slightly less clumsy. But the easing heat brings its own problems. As your body begins to cool down, you become more aware of your injuries and exhaustion. Your hands are raw and bleeding. Your back is so stiff that you can barely bend over. Your feet are swollen and painful inside your sandals. Every muscle in your body aches, and you still have hours of work left. The evening shift is different from the morning. You're moving more slowly, but everyone is moving more slowly, so the overall pace doesn't change much. The stones don't get any lighter, but your technique improves as desperation teaches you to use leverage and body mechanics more efficiently. You learn to save energy wherever possible, to rest for just a few seconds between lifts, to position yourself so that the strongest muscles do the most work. As the sun gets lower, the limestone blocks finally start to cool down. They're still hot, but not burning hot. You can touch them without immediately pulling your hand away. This small relief feels like a huge victory after hours of working with red-hot stone. Around 6 in the evening, word comes down from the overseers that the workday is almost over. Just 2 more loads of stones to move, and then you can head home. Those last 2 loads are the hardest of the day, not because the stones are heavier, but because your body is completely exhausted and running on willpower alone. The final stone is loaded onto the sledge just as the sun touches the western horizon. You and your 2 remaining partners, plus the replacement for poor Kenty, drag it slowly across the sand to where it needs to be unloaded. Unloading is almost harder than loading because you have to lower the stone carefully to avoid damaging it, and your muscles are so fatigued that you can barely control the descent. When the last stone is finally in place, you just stand there for a moment, hardly believing that you've survived the day. Around you, other workers are having the same reaction. Some are sitting in the sand, too exhausted to move. Others are already starting the long walk home, knowing that they need to get there before dark. The walk home is a different kind of torture. Your legs feel like they're made of lead, and every step is an effort. The sand that got into your sandals during the day has mixed with sweat and blood to form a paste that rubs your feet raw with every step. Your back is so stiff that you can't stand up straight, so you shuffle along bent over like an old man. Other workers are making the same journey, and you can see the toll the day has taken on everyone. Some men are supporting each other, too weak to walk alone. Others are limping badly, nursing injuries from the day's work. A few are being carried by their friends, unconscious from heat exhaustion, but still alive. The sun sets as you're walking home, and the temperature finally begins to drop significantly. The cool evening air feels wonderful on your burned and battered skin, but it also makes you aware of how much damage has been done. Your lips are cracked and bleeding. Your skin is burned red despite your natural tan. Your hands are so swollen that you can barely make a fist. By the time you reach your neighborhood, it's almost dark. Oil lamps are flickering in windows, and the smell of cooking food makes your stomach clench with hunger. You realize that you've eaten almost nothing all day except that piece of bread at dawn, and your body desperately needs fuel to recover from the ordeal. Your house looks like a palace compared to the construction site, even though it's just a small mud brick building with a dirt floor. You collapse onto your reed mat and just lie there for several minutes, too exhausted to move. Every muscle in your body aches, and you can feel your heart still pounding from the day's exertion. Water is the first priority again. You drink deeply from your pottery jar, and the lukewarm, slightly muddy water tastes better than anything you've ever had. You pour some water into a basin and try to wash the worst of the dirt and sweat from your body, but every touch is painful on your burned and abraded skin. Food comes next. If you're lucky, someone in your family has prepared a meal of bread, beer, and perhaps some vegetables or dried fish. You eat mechanically, too tired to taste anything, but knowing that your body needs the nutrients to recover. The food sits heavy in your stomach, but gradually you begin to feel slightly more human. As you lie on your mat in the darkness, you think about tomorrow, because tomorrow you'll get up before dawn and do it all again, and the day after that, and the day after that. This isn't a temporary job or a summer project. This is your life, and it will continue until your body can no longer handle the strain, at which point you'll probably die. But you also think about what you accomplished today. You moved tons of stone that will be part of a structure that will still be standing thousands of years from now. Future generations will look at the pyramid you're helping to build and marvel at the skill and determination of the people who created it. They probably won't think about the individual workers who suffered and died to make it possible, but you know that your sweat and blood are literally part of the mortar that holds the stones together. Sleep comes quickly despite the discomfort. Your body is so exhausted that it overrides the pain and heat and noise of the neighborhood. You sleep deeply and dreamlessly, and in what feels like just a few minutes, you'll wake up and do it all again. This is what one day of work was like for an ordinary person in ancient Egypt. No safety regulations, no overtime pay, no sick days, no workers' compensation. just the brutal reality of physical survival in one of the harshest environments on Earth. Most modern people, even those who consider themselves tough and physically fit, would not survive a single day of this kind of work. The ancient Egyptians, who built the pyramids and temples and cities that we admire today, were incredibly hardy people. They had to be, because the weak simply didn't survive. They developed techniques and technologies and social systems that allowed them to accomplish amazing things under conditions that would defeat most modern humans. But the cost was enormous. The average lifespan was short, often less than 30 years. Many workers died on the job from heat stroke, accidents, or simple exhaustion. Injuries that would be minor inconveniences today were often fatal then because there was no effective medical treatment. The social system that made these great construction projects possible was also incredibly harsh. Workers had no choice in their employment. They worked because the alternative was starvation or slavery or death. The pharaohs and nobles who commissioned these monuments lived in luxury, while the workers who built them lived in conditions that we would consider barely survivable. Yet there's something admirable about what these people accomplished. They created works of art and architecture that have lasted longer than most civilizations. They developed engineering techniques that we still use today. They created a society that, while harsh by modern standards, was stable and prosperous enough to support massive public works projects for thousands of years. When you look at the pyramids or visit an Egyptian museum, remember that every stone was moved by human hands. Every decoration was carved by someone working in conditions that would hospitalize most modern people. The monuments of ancient Egypt are not just impressive engineering achievements, they're memorials to human endurance and determination in the face of almost impossible challenges. The workers who built these monuments are mostly forgotten now. We don't know their names or their stories, but their legacy is written in stone, literally. Every time someone looks at a pyramid and marvels at how it was built, they're paying tribute to thousands of ordinary people who gave their lives to create something extraordinary. So the next time you complain about your job, remember the ancient Egyptian construction worker getting up before dawn to move 400-pound stones in 115-degree heat with no air conditioning, no cold drinks, no safety equipment, and no hope of a better life. Your worst day at work probably doesn't compare to their best day. That's the reality of surviving an ancient Egyptian workday. Most of us wouldn't last until lunch, and those who did would probably spend the rest of our lives recovering from the experience. The people who built one of history's greatest civilizations were tougher than we can imagine, and they paid a price for their achievements that we can barely comprehend. Thank you for listening to this journey back in time. I hope it's given you a new appreciation for both the achievements of ancient Egypt and the incredible toughness of the people who made them possible. Sweet dreams, and remember that your comfortable bed and climate-controlled room are luxuries that the pyramid builders could never have imagined.